Hey, good morning, everybody. Nikki Burnett here. Taste Life Nutrition. This is Taste Life Nutrition Radio, streaming live on KUHSdenver.com, where our goal is to bring you the best of the best and maybe help you think outside of the box a little bit. That is my goal. I think a lot of times looking outside of the conventional can be really beneficial. And so we want to bring to you health on all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational, financial, all of the things. And so it's really fun when I can bring to you people who are here, as always, though, doing things that are stepping outside of the box, who are helping others and who have a really cool history. I mean, so often, though, we are doing what we do because of our history, and so we like to hear the stories. I like to hear the stories of where people come from and how they get to where they are. So today we have Paul Shirley, who is sitting way lower than I am because he's like 2 feet above me. So
we did a lot of arranging.
Yeah, we did a lot of arranging for sure. But Paul is a former pro basketball player. Chicago Bulls, Phoenix Suns.
Both correct.
And one more. No, several. It was like 19.
17 different professional teams.
Wow.
Yeah. Although only 3 NBA teams, really.
Okay.
So you got 2 of them. And then the Atlanta Hawks.
There you go. There you go.
Plus lots of, I played in Spain, Greece, and Russia.
Ooh, I don't think I knew that. Amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. And for minor league teams, went to various training camps and got cut. Summer league teams, it was wherever they would take me. I would go. I was a basketball mercenary.
So it's amazing how you can just that's a lot in just a few years.
Yeah. So basically, I spent from the year 2000 to 2010, more or less, as a professional basketball player, traveling wherever. They needed to pay me to play a game. Yeah. So it was a lot in a pretty brief time. You're right.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful for all that you've done because it's brought you to where you are now. We'll get into that in just a minute, but first we always start the show with gratitude. And I have to apologize because your head's a little bit cut off, but I don't know what to do. Right now.
I can scoop
anyway.
Back. How's that? That does make my head look gigantic.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Yeah. It's what happens when you're, pushing 7 feet. How tall
are you? I'm 6'9".
Okay, you are pushing 7 feet.
I suppose I am pushing 7 feet. Yes.
Amazing.
True.
Yeah.
For those who don't understand Nikki's lot in life, it's a real control center in here, so. Be grateful to her for being able to put this together. It feels like we're in a spaceship.
We kind of are. Yeah, there's a lot around us. And I'm grateful to Henry. This is his studio, his station, all the things he does. He runs the show and helps with all the techie stuff. So yeah, it's a good time though. It's amazing the amount of people we get to reach and get out really good information. And that's always my goal, is to bring the very best that I can, so people can live that big life that they're intended to live, right? Kind of like what you're doing. There are people out there who are trying to build their businesses. They're having a tough time, and you are there to build them up. Mm-hmm. And so, first, before we get into that, sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. Bad habit. Squirrel, always. What are you grateful for?
I had a near nervous breakdown last night, so...
Not because of the show.
No. Yeah, I was so nervous to be talking to you today. No, just around business things. I run my own business, and I find that there are times, we will talk more about this, when it gets to be a lot, right? And so I guess what I'm grateful for today is the fact that I was able to hook into some of my daily habits this morning and help to kind of work my way through some of the chaos of last night. I didn't sleep a lot last night. I'm not probably at my best. Sorry to everybody that's paying attention.
Fine.
But you may get a more authentic version of me because of that. So all the better. So I think I have found that that my brain is somewhat chaotic, and that's why I'm so dependent on systems that I can connect back into each day to make sense of that and to equalize. So I'm happy and thankful that I was able to do that today.
Yeah, oh man, I feel you. There's been a lot of that in my world as well. You know, the chaos and the frustration, the questions, and you know, I don't know, you know, what's going on with you, but I just know that I feel what you're saying. And I would say that, you know, my gratitude is similar to that, where you know, I'm finding people who are outside of my wheelhouse, who know how to help me find ways of finding balance, finding being centered, giving me tools, new tools that I've heard of but I don't really truly understand, to bring myself to a place of calm. Because it is really hard when it feels like everything around you is chaotic, and you're for me it's a little bit of losing control, and going, okay, I'm not really in control. You know, for me, I need to drop the control, because as a Christian, I'm like, it's not on me, it's on him, right? And so it's one of those things that I have to sit back and take a step back and go, okay, just chill the F out, because you know, you're growing. This is a growth spurt.
Right.
And it's freaking hard. I was on my way in. There's one thing, that's this tapping your thymus and saying all of the good things, right? And I was like, okay, I'm really grateful for growth, and really grateful for growth when it's past. You know what I mean?
You know, the rings in the tree, the growth rings, have been laying it down.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to look back with some gratitude then. When you're in the midst of laying down those rings,
you're like, holy
it's not
smokes.
very fun. How do you feel about, one of the things I struggle with is I'm doing a lot of coaching of people, right? Talking them through making changes in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think what we see in the world is a sense that some of the gurus that we see on social media have things figured out and are looking back at, like, here's all the things I did right, or here's the mistakes I made, but now I've arrived and now I can coach you. And one of the fights I often have is that I'm in the middle of it too. I think sometimes that can be helpful to people, but other times, just naturally, people might say, well, you don't even have your own life put together. Why should I allow you to coach me? Do you see that as a paradox or as a challenge?
It's a really great question. I see it as, I think that even those who we see who are up here, who seem to have it figured out, they still don't have some things figured out, right? It's sort of, I think it's still part of the process. You know, I've had my own health struggles, and will still continue to guide people through their health struggles, because there are things that I've been through, but then there are also things in my own research and my own understanding. But I think we see those people as the people who have it all figured out, and I don't think they do.
They never do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing I learned from professional sports, right, was that nobody really knew what they were doing. There's the quote by William Goldman, the writer of The Princess Bride, where he's talking about how no one in Hollywood can predict whether a movie will be a success or not. And the quote is very simple. He just says, no one knows anything. Right? And he was talking about this world of movies in Hollywood. That's what I found to be true in the world, right? Like, no one knows what the hell's going on at any time. So, and I think some of my success as a writer about my sports days came from admitting none of us know what's going on here, right? Like, I remember so vividly writing this blog while playing for the Phoenix Suns about the reality of being on a road trip and not being able to remember which room I was in one night because we had just been in a different city the night before, right? Which is not the glamour and glitz that you want necessarily out of your athletes, but I think it touched a nerve with people because they then saw that, oh, these people are going through the same things I'm going through, or that's how I would probably behave if I were in their shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how there's such a pedestal, for whatever industry, there's always that pedestal, and you're always looking up and you're always thinking, okay, they have it figured out, or it's glamorous, or it's, it's the easy road now, right? Because they're making however much money. You're a pro, you're making all this money. When what I would imagine in talking with you and a few others, that sure, there's a lot of success there because you worked your ass off for that success, but there's still a lot of challenges and struggles and things that you have to do and things that are the behind the scenes that are still there to help you grow. And
and
right.
It's also worth noting that when someone is willing to pay you a lot of money, they expect a lot from you.
Right.
It's not like they just say, hey, here's a bag of cash and now relax and have a great time.
Yeah.
It's now the expectations have ramped up based on what your salary is or how much they've invested in you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine the pressure. Really.
Well, it's sometimes that's another place I sometimes beat myself up.
Okay.
I used to play basketball in front of, 15,000 people in an arena, and sometimes millions of people on TV. This is probably more true in my college days, because as a pro, because I was moving around all the time, it was a little bit harder to put as much pressure on myself because I wasn't in the same place for 5 years like I was in college.
Yeah.
But the same illustration applies. Being able to calm myself down in order to, say, shoot a free throw in front of screaming fans, right, was a real, of course, a challenge, and something I worked at to be able to get to that point. And so now whenever I'm anxious about an email I have to send or whatever, I sometimes will think, like, this is insane. You used to be able to do this thing that very few people in the world could do, and now this is bothering you? So I suppose the answer is that it never ends, right? And that there is also, there's context here, right? So when you get used to doing something over and over, it doesn't become so intimidating, right? Like playing basketball in front of thousands of people was not really that big of a deal because I had worked my way up to it. I was doing it all the time. Now, if I need to ask somebody for investment or pitch something to somebody, and I'm like, I don't really know how. This is terrifying.
Am I wording it right?
It's not as physically terrifying, but it's still in my brain that I'm not totally sure what I'm doing.
Do you have tools that you used from basketball that have carried over to business that help you in situations like that, or other situations?
So the business I run, as you know, is called The Process, and I wrote a book called The Process is the Product, which really is about the lessons I learned from sports that then I applied to writing, which now I have realized are sort of applicable everywhere, which is, it is a little bit trite and cliche at this point, but figuring out how to love the day-to-day, how to love that process. So for me, it does come back to taking action each day according to the plan that I've laid out for myself, trusting that I've built this plan and I know what the steps are, and all I have to do today is this step. And if I start thinking about here, I'm kind of in trouble. Now, does that keep me from ever thinking about here? No, of course not. But if I'm able to return to the same attitude that I took toward going from a 13-year-old in Meriden, Kansas, who learned how to play basketball on his gravel driveway behind the deck behind his parents' house, to I was actually a walk-on at Iowa State. That means that I didn't have an athletic scholarship. I went on an academic scholarship, so no one really expected much from me. To then, we were really great college basketball team, won the Big 12, which some people may or may not know what that is. That's a league here in the U.S.
Can I interrupt you real quick, because I'm really curious about, when you went on as the academic, what did you expect of you?
I thought I would be a professional basketball player someday.
Yeah.
I felt like there's something about this that I understand better than the people around me. Now, with that said, I was also hyper aware that there were potential injuries to deal with. I couldn't control exactly what the results would be.
Sure.
So that, I think, connects to where we're headed with this. I was a good college basketball player, not a great one. And then I wormed my way into the pros, eventually becoming, there's really no argument, among the best 300 basketball players in the world, a few different times, right? Like I wasn't in the best 100, but I was in the best 300, and I would kind of weave in and out of the NBA and stay overseas. And what that points to is that the system I built, the staircase that we're talking about, started when I was 13 years old, and only really finished when I was 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Right? That's a really long time. It just takes such a long time to figure that out. And I tell myself that often when it comes to writing books, when it comes to running a business, that it's going to take a long time. Does that betray me occasionally and I can't sleep at night? Of course. So I think it's, it's sort of similar to, I don't know, an alcoholic who struggles with, well, I had a relapse or something like that, right? Like you build these systems, but our brains do occasionally get in our way, right? So like you have to, I think, admit that that this stuff isn't just as simple as I'm going to turn myself into a robot and do the same thing every day.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the process, and so what that looks like in on the day to day. What you're doing to help people. What gave you? I know you said what gave you the idea, but how did you turn the idea into a business?
When I moved to Los Angeles after my basketball career, I thought I would just be a writer. I would just write a book every couple of years, and that's how I would make a living. Sent what was my second book off to my agent. My first book I had written while I played still, right? So this was now post-career. Sent it to my agent. He's like, nobody wants this. Thought I would self-publish it. That wasn't even going to work. So I had a real come to Jesus meeting with myself about like, oh, I actually don't know what I'm doing. And I also, part of this is I don't even know that many writers. So I started a little thing in LA called Writer's Block that was mostly just a meetup for writers to get together, sit and write. Afterward, we would talk briefly about what everybody had accomplished, and at the beginning we handed out oatmeal cream pies as kind of a reward, which I quickly learned people don't like as much as I like.
Amazing.
So we very soon switched to chocolate. But point is, there was something to it. Like even on the first night, there were 17 people there. And there was this sense of like, oh wow, when I'm around other people, this job of writing isn't as hard, right? The peer pressure helped with them. Yeah. So we moved
like going to the gym.
It's exactly like going to the
gym. Yeah, that's how I
feel. We moved from temporary spaces to our own permanent home. Started selling memberships, had T-shirts and tote bags and like the whole shebang. And along the way, I and a friend realized it's not just writers who needed this. It was sort of all, we didn't know how to define it quite at the time. It was all hybrid workers, etc. This is sort of pre-COVID. So started a separate company called The Process. Then COVID hits. Lockdowns just destroy Writer's Block because, we were an in-person business and it was in LA, which was a tough place to run a business at that time. So I moved to Denver to more fully flesh out the process. We have a physical space here that works kind of similarly to what we did with Writer's Block, although not just for writers. It's structured sessions, so a co-working space where people can come and know that they're going to lock in for an hour or 2 hours. There's an element of goal setting, there's an element of community and accountability afterward where we would say, Nikki, did you do what you said you were going to do? So a little bit like CrossFit meets knowledge work. I bring up the term knowledge work because what we have found is that our target audience is knowledge workers, which I find interesting because this has been a sector of the economy that has grown a ton in the last 40 years, but people don't really know what it is. So I'm going to briefly elucidate. Historically, there's 3 types of work. There's physical labor, so you're like moving bricks around. There's service, which is like you're a barista, or maybe even if you're a doctor, or in some cases you're doing customer service, right? The third type is knowledge work, which is anything that's non-routine, it's creative, and it moves information around. So a lot of what you do is knowledge work. And a lot of what people do now, all of us who are on computers moving information around, is knowledge work, but most of us and most of society was trained around how to do physical labor. Because for the bulk of our history, that's what a job was. You went out and plowed a field, or you built a road or whatever. So I feel like we're actually kind of on the forefront of figuring out how to reteach people how to do knowledge work, which is, it requires periods of deep work. It's not the same as standing at an assembly line and just like doing the same thing all the time.
Right.
It's having to conceive of, what do I need to do this week, this month, but now what do I need to do today, and how can I really and truly focus for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, not 5 hours. That's impossible.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we got to
Yeah.
disabuse people of the notion that you can focus for 5 hours. You could stand at an assembly line for 5 hours because it's like sort of low level, shallow work.
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that people don't have the tools to do that because we weren't necessarily taught that in school. And now we're also adding in this layer of, people are so distracted now by the amount of information coming at them at all times, right? We're sort of gluttons for information in the same way that we're gluttons for food. We love it, and we can't stop ourselves. So that means there's two things happening at once. We need to be better at focusing at the same time that the world is making it harder to focus.
Yeah.
So
you have to have
a
tools.
lot of what we do is working with businesses and individuals in 6-week modules around how to get people to build systems again so that they can do these periods of deep work, which sounds, honestly, sometimes when I talk about it, people are like, well, like, what is that exactly? But I think what people find is that once they start digging in, I'm working with someone one-on-one right now, and she admitted to me the other day that, like, she's like, when I made myself sit for 20 minutes without being able to reach for my phone, I actually got the jitters. It's like going through withdrawal for people because we're so used to so much information. And in the same way that an addict has a hard time seeing healthy, I think people struggle to see what focused work or flow states can do for them. And once they do them, they're like, oh my God, I needed to do this 5 years ago.
So I don't know if you already said this. I don't remember that you did. But one of the things that you do is you have people put their phones in a little bag.
Yeah.
And put them into
the phone hotel. Yeah.
The phone hotel. Yeah. I love that. And so they're little orange bags with, it says the process on it. It's really awesome. But what I have, I'm very easily distracted, and I know this about myself. And one of the things that I do, this just kind of goes along with what you're saying. One of the things that I do is I have 100 tabs open, and then because it's my brain going this research, and so I have to go back to it, but some of it's not, and some of it is, and some of it's just I need to remember it, right? But then I'll also have 20 windows open.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my computer hates me.
Yeah, I'm constantly whirring. It just wants to take off from your desk. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So working on that. I actually went in and I went and organized everything. If you don't know, shoot, I'm not going to remember what it's called. It's an organization of your tabs. Toby. Have you heard of Toby?
No.
Kind of cool.
Okay.
I dig it. So, and it, it takes the pressure off your computer, and I'm learning the pressure off my brain.
Right.
So what I would do though is I would have pinned all of these tabs that are the things that I go to regularly, but it included my email, it included Facebook, right? So I have to mark it, and I have to go to LinkedIn, and I have to do all of these things. And I would find myself going to those and just going, and I finally one day went, I'm gonna clean my computer up, and I'm also gonna clean these tabs up and put them somewhere else. So in my Toby, I have what's called pinned tabs. So when I can go to it when I need to, and remember that it's there. But I noticed when I did this, it wasn't intentional, that I stayed away from my email. And I stayed away from the Facebook and the LinkedIn until I needed to go to it for whatever reason. So I can only imagine that if you're going somewhere where it's quiet, because I've obviously been to his location. It's great. It's calm. Nice music, right? There's good, nice music.
Yeah,
like, there's always good music, yeah. And it's just, and there's a little, there's a gathering space, but then there's spaces where you can be alone. Anyway, it's a really nice spot, and I can only imagine that when you get there, and all you have to do is get your shit done. That's what you do. Right.
I mean, that makes it sound a little easier than it actually is, because people are still going through that temptation, right, to open a tab, right?
Yeah.
So like we're not standing over them, making them stay off of those tabs, and I think that's part of why some of this takes a while, right? It's
Yeah.
not like you can just decide one day, here's what I'm going to do. I'm never going to look at my email after noon or whatever the thing is. We talk a lot about how habits are formed, right? And I'm sure you think about this a lot as a health coach. We like to think, especially because we're adults, that we should be able to just say, I'm going to stop doing this thing, right? But the reason that we do those things is because they're habits or routines, right? They're built in, they're hardwired through like neuroplasticity and all of the stuff that we don't want to get into because I'm not actually a neuroscientist. We're hardwired to do those same things over and over, right? Like the simple example is when you brush your teeth, you don't think about brushing your teeth, you just get the toothpaste and go, right? You don't have to consciously do that.
Yeah.
And it's very similar with, I'm just going to go check my email right now because it's reflexive, right? Like I've done a thing and now I should reward myself by checking my email. But our brains don't make a lot of sense out of the fact that that might lead to infinite hallways, right? It's like going into a room where we're not sure how many hallways there might be that branch off from that room.
Yeah.
And that's also the fight, right? The companies that build these software programs and apps are using our worst nature against us, right? They know that those things like intermittent reinforcement really work on the human brain, so I don't know how many emails are going to be in there when I go to check. Maybe there's going to be a really fun email, maybe it's going to be something terrifying, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You know, again, wiser people than I have talked about this stuff. So it is retraining instead of that behavior, right, of going to check that tab, what behavior are you putting in place of it, right? So it could be as large as I'm going to pick up a book, right?
Yeah.
And try reading that. These habit gurus talk a lot about how it's not so much that you want to stop a behavior, it's that you want to put a different behavior in when you are cued or triggered to do something, right? So you're triggered by, I need some relief from this PowerPoint, or I need to look away from this presentation I'm working on. And your instinct, because you've done it for so long, is I'll go check Twitter, right? But now you're on Twitter and that switch costs you something in cognitive effort. And you've also sent yourself away to this, again, new room, effectively, and it becomes really hard. So we have to think about what are you going to put in place that's a healthier behavior that also sounds attractive.
Yeah, it's that when something's empty, what's going to fill it? You've got, and you have to fill it with something, or it would be filled probably with something negative, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the other age-old one is, a lot of times people smoke not even for the nicotine after many years of doing it. It's the break, it's the taking of the breath.
Having something in your hand.
Right, so if you can say, instead of that, what if you walked outside and drank a favorite drink in place of the cigarette, right? Like, just as an example, that's a very antiquated one, because I don't think there's a lot of smokers around. Yeah, but if you want to take a spindrift with you outside, right, and drink that, and then that might serve in place of the cigarette. And what's interesting, and I think what people often forget, is that this stuff's only hard at the beginning. Eventually it becomes self-reinforcing in that it feels good inherently. The fight is just at the start.
It's just getting through it.
Is figuring out how to rewire some of that.
Yeah. I was doing a show with one of my other guests, Dr. Diane Mueller. I think that she's the one who said it, but it was, you know, as a nutritionist, as any of us who are helping people, you know, essentially change habits, right? So any kind of coach, you as well. There is, the way she described it, she's like, you always have to cross the river, and the river can be really hard to cross. But imagine what happens when you cross it and you're on the other side. You're like, all right, good stuff.
Yeah, and that is one of the struggles with our business, and I'm sure yours, is people have to be ready to do this, right? They have to have decided,
have to be ready.
Like, I'm at enough of a bottom. I'm so scattered in my world, and I'm not getting enough done, and I recognize this isn't making me happy. Therefore, I need some sort of help. And that can be, I think, from a marketing standpoint, challenging, right? Because it's not as easy as saying, like, this Dr. Pepper is going to make you feel great, right?
Yeah. Dr. Pepper. I used to have a real problem with Dr. Pepper.
Oh, okay. That's why it's on your mind.
I certainly don't anymore. My husband will grab it every now and then, and it's once a month or whatever he does, mostly on trips going to Kansas. But he'll grab one, and I'll take a drink, and like, it's just so sweet. It's so bad.
Yeah, when you get off that stuff, it's wild.
It is.
I made myself the other day. This is such a nerdy thing. I was like, you know what? It's kind of a hot day outside. I need to go down to the lounge in my apartment building to do a little work. I should make lemonade. What I made, my taste buds are now so ready for not sweet things that lemonade was really just a squeezed lemon, a bunch of water, and a tiny bit of honey. And it was
beautiful.
It's like,
so good.
I put some salt in there also just for fun. And to me, that tastes as sweet as lemonade tasted when I was a kid, because I've gotten so far away from it.
It's amazing, how it can change when we lose that sensitivity, which is a good thing. We want to lose that sensitivity to sweet. Sweet's not bad. It helps us it helps the body to recognize food, right? Taste is a good thing, but we've gotten to this point in our world where things aren't sweet enough, and so then we go and sweeten them with fake sweet, right? Which is even sweeter, and the brain's like, I don't know what to do with this, and the liver's like, I don't know what to do with this, and so it just creates this nasty problem with all these fake foods and the intensity of the sweetness. I remember as a kid, my mom would bring home strawberries, and I would take them, and I would open up the white sugar canister, stick it in the white sugar canister, and eat it. I'm like, because it's just not sweet enough.
Right.
It's amazing. I could never even, I eat a strawberry now. I'm like, this is the most delicious, sweetest thing I can imagine.
Well, and what's, I think, pertinent about what you're talking about to my world is information works in the same way. Right now, we are all being bombarded with a saccharine version of information. So quick hits that make us feel good very briefly, right? They're not the same as sitting with a book, or even sitting outside with your own thoughts, or meditating, or whatever the thing is. And I'm just as guilty of this as anyone, that I'm searching for that next quick hit of serotonin or whatever the exact hormone is that's involved. And it is so much like sugar, because once you get away from it, and then you start eating healthy in an information way, and you start reading books again, you have the attention span to do those things, you realize like, oh, this makes me really happy. I feel really good about this. In the same way that now, if I cook myself a steak that has basically no seasoning on it, I'll be like, wow, this is really good. As compared to maybe eating a McDonald's hamburger or something, right?
So it's interesting, kind of getting onto the nutrition piece, because I know that you have a history, being in sports, and we had talked about this just a little bit, but and I've talked to others about this, but professional sports, even college sports, high school, kids don't care about what they eat, but the lack of attention to nutrition through professional sports, which is so bizarre to me, really, when the better you eat, the better your performance, the better your brain, the better your muscle growth, the better everything is. And it's like a thought. It's just not even a thought for some, not for all. I know some of them are starting to move in that direction, but what was your experience, and what was it that made you change? Because I know you changed, but it was after professional sports that you made the change.
It was frustrating.
You go to sleep.
Oh yeah, you know my battle. It was frustrating during my career. That, for example, maybe we'd have a really brutal road trip where, even in college, I noticed this. We would fly to, let's say, the University of Colorado, because at the time, Iowa State and Colorado were in the same league. Maybe we arrive at night, and they're just like, okay, go to bed, and you are thinking to yourself, I am a 6'9", 230-pound, high-level athlete who's also kind of still growing, right? I'm 19 or 20 years old.
For sure.
Has no one thought about the fact that we're all starving, right? Like, this can't possibly be advantageous for tomorrow's game. It might not matter that much, but it's definitely not good for us. And I think as I look back, there is a bit of regret in my head because my brain was saying that this didn't make sense, but I didn't really do anything about it because I was also just sort of going along with the crowd. Like, oh, well, nobody's thinking about this. They must know better than I do, so let's not concern ourselves with it. When I think back to that time in my life, the goal was almost always number of calories effectively, right? Like just
that's what a lot of people
enough,
still believe.
right? Just get
let's
enough
just talk about calories.
energy in.
Yeah.
And I think back to how much, like I don't know how far that rabbit hole you want to go down, but how much sugar, how many like simple carbs I was eating,
The
and
energy
how,
bars,
yeah,
the
and how
Gatorades,
inflamed I was all the time.
Oh yeah.
Because so I had in college 3 different stress fractures, for example, right? As a pro, then got hurt a bunch, but had 2 knee surgeries. Both knees scoped, broke my ankle, had 3 surgeries on that, right? Broke my foot in college, like lots and lots of stuff that I think could be tied to just kind of chronic inflammation and overuse.
And
both of those things,
nutrient
right?
deficiencies.
Yeah, like I wasn't eating enough great food for the amount of stress and the frequency of the stress on my body.
Yeah.
It wasn't as simple as like, well, you just need to drink more milk because your bones are breaking. It's a little more complicated than that, I think.
Yeah, and that's not true.
But it was, yeah. And it was also the case that, like you said, no one was paying attention to those things. So it wasn't even really an option. It wasn't like I went out of my way to eat poorly or suboptimally. It just, we didn't think about it, right? Which is insane looking back, right? Especially considering the amount of money that was attached. I will say that I think what they would probably say is that they were trying to pick their battles. They're like, we can only control so much about your life, so therefore we're going to focus on practicing for 3.5 hours and not on what did you eat for lunch today.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's that, I don't know, it's just, it frustrates me because, well, okay, so sorry, I did a brain fart for a second. What I know about this is a very small amount, right? So you and Lowry, my husband, are both from Kansas, and so he went to KU. KU has, or had, I'm assuming they still have her, but a nutrition coach, like this high-level nutrition coach. And obviously KU's pretty good at what they do, right? I mean, they brought us Christian Brown, right? But I mean, of course, that's the nutrition is a part of it, skill is a part of it, but having that piece of it, and even if you can't control it, as because it's hard to control kids that age, you're still kids. It's the impression, it's bringing the impression upon them how important this is. If you want to grow, if you want to be successful, if you want to move to the next level, whatever that next level is, this has got to be, a key part of who you are, your daily life. And to kind of bring it, I think, full circle, I hope I'm not cutting you short, but what I love also then about what you're doing now with the process is that's exactly what you're doing, is you're trying to bring, at least introduce people to the other things out there that are going to help them to live that full, holistic, successful business life. Right?
So if we talk about this stereotypical knowledge worker, right? I think historically we've treated them sort of like bricklayers, right? We're just like, well, we'll just kind of burn you out, and then when we need a new one, we'll get that person in here. That's not good for the business or the team that they're on or the department they're in, and it's definitely not good for the person, right? So what I would say is, instead of treating people like bricklayers, we need to treat them more like high-level basketball players and actually start thinking about what is the connection between how focused you are today and how you slept last night. What did you eat yesterday? What is that having to do with your ability to pay attention today? Does that mean, like, if you slept for 8.5 hours as opposed to 6.5, does that mean that you have either 20 minutes of deeper focus in you today or 25 minutes of focus? And imagine, like, value is added for people in this knowledge work world at those margins of like 5 more minutes versus 20. That's 25% more productivity, right? Similarly, if you could be 20% more locked in on whatever you're doing because you slept an extra 2 hours last night. That might mean the difference for the business of these like big lever arms of now you're suddenly like, that might be like a 10 times return on the investment in thinking about that. The issue is that similar to sports, we haven't yet started to really think about how we treat our brains and our ability to focus. And we tend to go back to this mentality of, well, all this person needs to do is move this thing from here to here. How great do they have to be? Now, obviously, some of this stuff would also really apply to the proverbial bricklayer, but that's not really my concern. That's not my forte.
No, I get that. Yeah, so I have been a little bit a part of this, which I've had a good time with and appreciated. So I love that. That's why. Well, I'm going to take a quick deviation into something that I'm doing that has a little bit to do with. Well, I'm not speaking well at all. Jeez. But has a little bit to do, it's similar to what you're doing, but different, right? So, I'm talking about soulful conception. For those of you who know about this, this is preconception planning. It is purposeful living for a healthy body, healthy baby, and a healthy pregnancy. A lot of what I'm working on doing with this program is, yes, it is absolutely for the women, their spouses, right? It's mostly for women, but I want their spouses to be involved. Obviously, they're half of the process. Pretty important. But beyond just this, it's also about creating a healthy future, right? So impacting the future, empowering women and couples to understand the power that they have of, yes, creating today, but also creating for generations. What I'm also trying to do with that, though, is build a community of practitioners, because my clients who come into this program, I want them to be introduced to all of the different modalities that might be beneficial for them to move through the process of planning for pregnancy and being as successful as they can with as many tools and guides as they possibly need. Because I know when they come into this program, they are going to need some of what I have, but they might need a hypnotherapist. They might need a fertility coach. They might need someone that helps them with the biomechanics, right? So bringing in people and kind of just spreading the love is really what I'm hoping for, and introducing people to modalities that they may not know exist. Kind of like this show. I want to bring to you what you may or may not know is out there. Think outside of the conventional and find the things that are going to be the most helpful for you, bring you good information, real information, solid information. And it just goes back to being of service. And when I know something really cool, I want to share it. So, it's really kind of what it comes down to. So anyway, if you have any questions or thoughts regarding soulful conception, please reach out. You can, Taste Life Nutrition in all the places. And I really, like I said, I'm here to be of service. So if there's somebody else that can serve you better than I, then that's the way that it needs to be. That's the way that I want it to be. So reach out. We'll get more into that here a little bit later. But beyond that, I wanted to, I know what I want to talk about. So you brought this idea and you had a full name for it. We just call it the Victors.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to talk about the Victors, and I want to talk about where that came from and why it came from. I forgot I had another question.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. That's what we're here to do.
Jumping around a lot. So I do want to get into that next.
Okay.
I want to know where you see and where you want to go with the process. And then I want to jump into the Victors and a little bit of that.
Got it. I think like you, my goal is to help people.
Yeah.
There's a great book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks, where he talks about generally everyone's first mountain is sort of ego-based around like, I want to be the best basketball player, right? I want to be famous. And you realize when you get to the top of that mountain that it doesn't make you any happier.
Right.
And so inevitably people have a big sort of come down and then realize that their second mountain is how can they give? How can they be of service to others? So my hope is to, and this is on my mind because we talk a lot about values at the process, because you can't really make changes unless you've decided why you want to make that change, and that usually can be tapped into by talking about people's values, like what do they care about most. So I love personal connection, right? It's like really making a connection with someone.
Yep.
And I love new experiences and sort of personal growth, which all ties together with this. So as I look at where I would like to take it, it is continuing to do what we do here in Denver, continuing to work with businesses, but also like new types of businesses all the time. We've worked with, for example, a company that does telehealth. So I got to work with a bunch of coders and software developers who talk about people who really need to focus, right? Perfect audience in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't necessarily have thought about that. The more I meet these new types of clients, the better I get at talking and teaching these concepts. So that's a win. But then selfishly, I do love going out and talking about these things, meeting people, seeing the light go on, demystifying accomplishment, goal achievement, those kinds of things has been near and dear to me for so long, because as we talked about at the beginning of the show, you start to realize like no one knows anything. So we might as well be open and honest instead of trying to intimidate people with, here's all the stuff you have to do, thinking more in terms of how to simplify it and say, it's not that bad. I'm going to be here for you. It's not going to be easy necessarily, but we can come up with simple tools for this. So that's a long answer, but I see it as me being of service in a way that also matches up with my values. Because there's a selfishism to that, right? Like it just so happens that I like these things. I like going out and giving talks and working with people and seeing their eyes light up when these things function. So I think I'm pretty paired with the right kind of pursuit because those things turn me on.
Well, I think, you can call it selfishism, but it's how you're made, right?
Right. I mean, that's how, I talk a little bit about how there's kind of two whys in our lives in the same way that on the basketball court, I had an individual goal. I needed to get better at basketball to stay on the court, to move on to the next team, whatever it is. But I had to subsume that to some degree to make the team win. And these are always in tension, right? So similarly, we all have our personal goals. We hope that we can line those up in service of a team or organization. And that's when we're really connected and whole. Sometimes they're at odds. Well, I'm here to just make money. This team needs me to be, giving. We're not actually aligned, and probably that relationship's not going to last very long.
Yeah. I think we see. Would you agree that we see that a lot?
Yeah, and I think I go through this a lot with people when I talk about how there's no reason to stay in a job you hate. And so people will push back and say, no, this is just how it is. You're supposed to hate your job. And I'm like, well, look, first of all, I'm not saying you need to love it all the time. That's insane.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you need to be in love with it every day, right? But if you truly hate it, like that's not right. Like,
well,
that's not
what a miserable life.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, who wants to be miserable and that you come across as miserable?
Right. And oftentimes, the reason you hate it is because your values are misaligned. It's not because there's something wrong with the job or something wrong with you. It's just like that's not what you need at that point in your life.
Yeah.
And so I do think we are maybe more than ever in love with money and material goods. We don't think about, if you suggest to somebody like, maybe consider being a teacher, they would say like, they don't make enough money. Well, teachers actually do make quite a bit of money. I mean, in the range, I think the average teacher is like $65,000 or $70,000 to work 185 days a year. That's not bad.
Yeah.
And you're giving of yourself, right? Which is a much better gig than like, well, I created a bunch of content for this company I don't care about on social media. Like, is that filling you up? I doubt it.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier, and this kind of takes a step back a little bit, but, as I was kind of, thinking about our conversation, was I think what you see on some of these teams when you have the egos, the selfishness, sometimes bad behavior, I couldn't help but to take it back to what are they eating? And some of it is, I think it all goes together. Some of it's the way that they grow up. Some of it's, a lot of the things that really should be addressed in other ways. Food can't do it. But if you're deficient, if you're not eating well, if you're inflamed, kind of all the things that we talked about. Those are things that are going to affect you mentally, emotionally, obviously physically. So it's just kind of one of those interesting thoughts that I had when we have some of those actors that we see that can be a little frustrating.
Or athletes, right? Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Actors or athletes.
I was like, actors. Yeah.
Yeah, and back to even as you were talking about preconception work, in a way that's similar to the sports world, in that it might not matter all that much, but it's definitely not going to help to have you be deficient in whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
Sleep, food, hormones, whatever that thing is.
Yep.
So why not give yourself the best chance to succeed in all of these arenas?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we also have to admit that we live in a time of extremism, and so sometimes people think, well, that means I have to be perfect, right? And that's obviously impossible. So I think it's also valuable to talk about, like, pressure releases. How do we build in, a realistic look at whether it's your work or my work? It's not that we're trying to turn you into the aforementioned automaton. We want to have you address this as a human that is also fallible.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to get to the victors. Let's talk about the victors.
Yeah, so we call it Victor, just singular, as a group.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's very new. My friend Dave and I were noodling on what we were seeing in the world, and the thing we kept coming back to was that we've incentivized a victim's mentality, which is historically incorrect. Throughout history, we celebrate victors. And that doesn't mean malevolent victors. We're not talking about like dictators and conquerors, but people who have overcome an obstacle, not those who have been defeated by the obstacle. This is not our terminology. It's just stuff that has resonated with us, what we've seen from books we've read and kind of what's happening in the proverbial zeitgeist. And so we, as you know, just wanted to get some people together who agreed with that. It's a little bit of, there's talk these days of the heterodox community, so people who have different views getting together, which is sort of the point of like classical liberal behavior, meaning that you accept each person on their own terms, their views are valid, which we, I think, have gotten away from a little bit in the U.S. So we wanted to get people together who were maybe of backgrounds that were different, but who shared some sense that like something's not quite right with this celebration of the victim over the victor.
Yeah, it seems like many of those who should be victors are the ones who are as just being crushed, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
I mean,
that's what's so odd about our times, right? We've inverted the scale.
Yeah.
Right. Normally, we are compassionate toward a victim, but we don't necessarily celebrate their victimhood.
Yeah.
Now it seems like we do celebrate them, in addition to being compassionate toward them, and then that means that those who do overcome and are champions are somehow shouted down, just because they're good at stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's not sustainable. It's historically incorrect, right? Like if we look through history, that's not how humans have behaved when they're in a healthy state of mind. And I think it will swing back eventually. We have been lucky in the West economically for 50 or 60 years, and so we have this luxury to be able to think we can turn all of this on its head. I read a book recently called The Age of Entitlement, which is actually about America since the 60s. So starting then, really, there was such an economic boom that allowed us to think, oh, the old ways are out, and now we're going to lift up all of the downtrodden, which, again, noble goal, but as you start to codify that, it has some unintended consequences, to say the least.
To say the least. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about how people can find you.
Website is createyourprocess.com. And if you're interested in following me on social media, it's at Paul Then Shirley on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. So check it out. Check him out. Are you doing anything virtually, or is it all? I thought you were.
We do. So we we do in-person stuff here in Denver. That's kind of like
Yeah.
the core of what we do. When we work with businesses, that's all remote. So
Okay.
we've worked with businesses that are in Seattle and Iowa and Buenos Aires. So it's usually, almost always, a group call where I'm leading people through over the course of 6 weeks a curriculum
Okay.
around like how to build these systems and processes.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, check him out. Really, really good stuff. You know, it's I love what you're doing, which of course is why I wanted to
Thank you.
have you on. I think it's
I should mention too, I wrote a book called The Process is the Product, which I'm not trying to shill for because it exists as a free podcast, so you can listen to each episode. Each chapter is an episode. or
Okay.
Each episode is a chapter.
Yep.
So if people are interested in learning more in a truly low impact way,
Cool.
like without any real commitment, that's a good way to get a sense of who I am and what we're doing.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, check it out. Good stuff. And you know, again, to be repetitive because I love it. People who are out there to help build others up are the people we need to surround ourselves by. We're here to lift each other up. So, of course, you can find me, Taste Life Nutrition, the website, all the social media. You can, on the website, fill out a free assessment that comes straight to me. I'll reach out to you personally. We'll chat a little bit about it. And of course, if you are looking to start or grow your family, if you know someone, one of the funniest things is when I talk about soulful conception, is people are like, oh, I'm way outside of that. Like, but you know people.
Right.
You know, we have this, it's all about me, which is okay. I mean, that's what we do. But we all know people who are looking to start and grow their families. And the goal of this really is to give the best start, reduce negative outcomes. The data shows that we do a few small changes prior to getting pregnant, we can reduce negative outcomes by 80%. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. And so that's what I want to see. I want to, if you know anyone, send them to me. Happy just to have a conversation. We have gotten it going and we're having some fun with it and again, I've got some of the most amazing guest experts who are joining me to help to guide clients through their process of getting ready, whatever that looks like. You know, we've got people with a lot of stuff going on that are getting really good help and really good guidance. So that's the goal of it. And that's it. You'll find us here every Thursday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time on kuhdenver.com. And then, of course, we are the Taste Life Nutrition Podcast after that, so you can find us afterwards if you're not able to join us live. And we will see you next week. Y'all have a good day. Bye. Thank you. Sorry.
Of
Thank
course.
you for being here.
Thank
I'm
you
really
for
grateful
having
that you were here. It's good stuff. All right. Bye, everybody. Yeah.
That ever-present moment of truth.